So hi, my name is Dr. Holly Fearnbach, and I am the Marine Mammal Research Director for SR3. And thanks so much for joining us for this Q&A. I was initially interested in marine biology right out of high school. And so I went to University of North Carolina at Wilmington for marine biology and started on bottlenose dolphin project there. And then I just continued. So I did my master's in biology, again, with a focus on bottlenose dolphins, association patterns. And then I did a lot of field work. So I did a lot of ship surveys and aerial surveys, mostly on the East Coast. Lived in Hawaii for a couple of years and ran a research program there, and then ended up on the West Coast and again continued a number of surveys and moved up to Seattle to start my PhD actually through the University of Aberdeen. So it was an overseas program. So a lot of different programs and a lot of different exposure to field projects, but then I started with SR3 right at the very beginning. So late 2016, early 2017. So I've been there from the very, very start, and it's been an incredible experience running the research program at SR3. And I was able to continue on projects that I've been involved with before SR3. We were talking about southern resident killer whales. We try to monitor the entire population. So currently at 73 individuals throughout the year, but they're in the Salish Sea at different times. I mean, for a good example, you have L-Pod down in Monterey Bay right now, and J-Pod in Puget Sound. And so they're, September is the time that we can usually collect aerial images of the entire population. And again, so we aim to get all 73 or 75, however many there are at the time, individuals during that time. And then we just have samples throughout the year. For other populations and species, like say Antarctic killer whales, we just try to get, as many individuals as we can during the time that we're down there. So it really varies. Sometimes we get several hundred individuals. Sometimes, we might just get a couple dozen. We've actually moved up to this octocopter drone, which is bigger, allows us to stay in the air even longer, so up to 30 minutes, much easier to see, so we can keep the vessel farther and farther away. And so we normally keep the research vessel at a distance of about 200 to 300 yards, and then we fly at an altitude of usually an average of about 140 feet, but between 100 and 150. And all of this is just to minimize disturbance to the whales. We collaborate with a number of different research groups. With the Puget Sound gray whale work, we collaborate with Cascadia Research Collective. We have down in Southern California, we have a project where I think there are about 8 different groups that are on the project. We are currently with Southern resident killer whales, have a collaboration with a student from University of Washington, collaborations with Department of Fisheries and Oceans, folks from NOAA. So just a number of different collaborations that we have. And it's always really exciting to see how many different ways, say like with Southern resident killer whale body condition, how that can be used, whether you're looking at how that is impacted by parasite loads, which is a student at the University of Washington, or with hormones, or a number of different things, relating it to fisheries abundance at different times. We're working with someone from Oregon State University on that project right now, and some other local groups. And so, yeah, it's always interesting to see, how many different ways the data can be used. That varies by species, but vocalizations, so that, acoustic monitoring. Some species like humpbacks, they have this really dynamic song. With a lot of dolphin species, you have whistles, and so you do have, the communications from that. But I've never gone into it. I have a lot of colleagues that study the acoustics, and it's one of the things that project that we're working on in Southern California with looking at behavioral response of dolphins. There is a group that does monitor acoustic response as well, and we're looking at how they respond from the air, and then another group's looking from shore, and another group has buoys in the water recording the acoustics. I definitely killer whales. Definitely killer whales, and southern resident killer whales. There's an amazing population to be able to study, and each individual. The history of each individual. It's been really great getting back up to Alaska the past couple of years, because that was a big part of my PhD research and studies, and it's such a different environment. And so that's been great. And Antarctica too. I mean, it's really special with the different types down there. So definitely killer whales, but each area has really interesting whales doing different things, different population dynamics, feeding on different things, having different struggles. But bottlenose dolphins are a close second. That was my initial study population, or a big part of my master's, and in Southern California, we're continuing that work. But yeah. One of the things that was actually part of my PhD thesis that we found is we were interested in if we could estimate the size of the whales, and then to see how they might have changed over time. And we found actually now for southern resident killer whales and northern resident killer whales that after this point where their growth slows, that the younger females aren't getting as large as the older females, likely because of nutritional stress during that period. There was a marked decline in the 1990s with the availability of salmon, and so those females would have been growing during that time. And it's something that we're continuing to monitor. We're actually working on updated growth curves and looking at that. We monitor young calves to see if they're growing as they should. J50 that we lost a number of years ago was never growing like she should have, and so she was always much smaller than the other calves, even at the same age. And so it's definitely something that we're continuing to collect this size data and monitor that. But you definitely kind of same in humans, when you have that stunted growth, if they aren't getting enough food, definitely see that carry over to the whales. And we found that with North Atlantic right whales as well. And so that is something that you're seeing in a number of different populations. Well, I think one of the things that's really important and really different about our research is that we have a number of long-term projects, and so it's continued monitoring and monitoring change and monitoring how populations are impacted by things like climate change and changes in prey availability. And so we're just gonna keep on doing the monitoring that we have been doing and working with government and conservation agencies. I think one of the things that with the Antarctic research, we're still trying to figure out exactly what those B2s are feeding on. So that smaller type, and you see them feeding on penguins at the surface, but then they're feeding on some sort of fish or squid, and it's kind of the big unknown. And they're the most abundant, but the smallest form. So we actually started collecting pre-COVID fecal samples from those whales, and so we're going to be that's going to be something that we're going to be focusing on down there in the next couple of years, because we've done the size estimates now and the abundance estimates, and we need to figure out exactly what they're feeding on. But the other project, continued monitoring, collecting more data, again, seeing how they change within years, between years. Data that makes a difference. It's something that I think with our southern resident killer whale research for a number of years, we were collecting lots of images and analyzing the data and publishing. We didn't see a lot of actions. We didn't see a lot of conservation measures and adaptive management decisions being made. And in the past, I'd say 3 or 4 years, we've just seen a huge shift. And so you're actually, seeing regulations change as far as vessel approaches with whales. You're seeing fishery regulation changes, both in the US and in Canada. So I think that's been the most, I think, rewarding thing of my career for sure, is to see the data actually getting used. And the same with the Antarctic killer whale data, as we're working with conservation groups and trying to have a marine protected area established. But that, again, is a difficult vote with an area that has so many different nations involved. But yeah, collecting the data and to see it actually going towards conservation measures is, really important. I think one of the key things is a lot of the actions that move forward. They're guided by the government, and who might be in office at certain times, and so it's really important, I think, for voting and to make sure that you have you vote and support people that are going to move conservation actions forward and make sure that they protect the fragile environment locally and as much as they can. There are a number of different whether it's with Washington State or whether it's Department of Fisheries, Oceans, or NOAA, that their comment period. So I think it's really important to just monitor that, and there might be opportunities to be able to voice your opinion on certain actions, whether it's giving whales more space or whether it's fisheries closures, a number of different things. And one of the things, especially with southern resident killer whales, is I think probably a number of different species, is there are a lot of moving parts, and so there are restoration projects going on. You have a lot of different research projects going on, monitoring the health and the acoustics, different things like that. And so it's you might be able to get involved even if it's just restoration work and things like that.